Hello, folks, and welcome to the Longhorn Mailbag, a new segment here on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. My name is Tommy Yarrish. Excited to be with you today. Just a quick explanation of how this will work. Every week, I'll go over to horns247.com on our board and post a thread asking you, the viewer, to drop your questions down below, and we'll pick a couple to answer on the show every week. So, we picked 5 for our first episode relating to Texas football because Big 12 Media Days is on the horizon next week in Arlington. But feel free to drop any questions relating to football, basketball, recruiting, or anything far and in between, and we'll make sure to cover all our bases here on the show every week. So, to start us off, let's get right into it. The first question: is the defensive line position a concern heading forward for Texas? I think we have to go back to when Steve Sarkisian was hired as the head coach in 2021, and it was clear early on that he wanted to improve the lines of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. Offensively, we have seen a lot of progress with the development of guys like Kelvin Banks and Christian Jones and up-and-comers in DJ Campbell and Cameron Williams, just to name a few. Kyle Flood and Steve Sarkisian have done a wonderful job on that side of the ball. Defensively, there's also been some good production. Bo Davis has been doing some good work. He puts Keandre Coburn and Moro Ojimo into the draft. But this question, we're talking about the future. Texas jumps to the SEC in 2024, where the defensive line doubles in priority, I think, when you move to that conference. Nonetheless, still important in the Big 12, but in the SEC, it's bigger, stronger, faster. It's the best conference in football. So you want to be prepared on the defensive line of scrimmage. I think this season, Texas is in a good spot where the defensive line can be a position of strength for them, especially on the interior. You have Byron Murphy returning, T'Vondre Sweat returning, Alfred Collins returning, a lot of experience there. And then along the edge, you have guys like Barron Sorrell, who exploded last season, and Justice Finkley, who showed some signs of promise as a freshman, Ethan Burke, who came in and played well when he got his opportunities, and they recruit well as well, Colton Vasek in the 2023 class, Jamon Tapp, a class earlier. So the positions and the players are there. But going forward, you really could see some signs of concern. After this season, we could see 5 departures on the interior of that defensive line to the NFL. So you think about, if there's not 5 departures, maybe someone who doesn't get as much playing experience, like Vernon Brockton, for example, could decide to come back for one more year. But there's still a lot of youth on that 2 deep with guys like Jere Bledsoe, who's from the 2022 signing class, just waiting for their chance. In 2023, Sarkisian and company only signed 1 interior defensive lineman in Sadir Mitchell. So Bo Davis is going to have some work to do heading forward into the SEC, whether it be in the transfer portal or it is in the 2024 recruiting class. The Longhorns already have 3-star defensive lineman from Duncanville, Alex January, on the board on the interior of that defensive line. Is it a concern this year? I don't think so. Heading into 2024, maybe a little bit, but in the era of transfer portal college football, that position can easily be filled in the portal depending on who jumps in there. All right, let's go to our second question now. If you knew that Quinn Ewers would end up in New York at the end of the season, what would your regular season record prediction be? Now, this is a really good question. I think if Quinn Ewers is going to end up in New York City after the regular season, obviously, first of all, that means he's taken a huge leap from his first year with the Longhorns into the second. And I think that Texas is at least 11-1 with a massive win over Alabama. When you think about the Heisman Trophy, you think about each candidate's Heisman moment, their biggest performance of the season. Quinn Ewers' biggest performance of the season is lying on a platter for him in week 2 against Alabama. Now, not to make that out to seem like Alabama is an easy task, because they're not, and they've shown that historically. They bring back a really solid defense this year under Nick Saban, as they usually do. But the opportunity is right there. In his limited playing time against Alabama last season, Ewers looked to be pretty solid. He had a deep ball to Xavier Worthy that got 105,000 people on their feet before he was knocked out of the game with an injury later on. But the opportunity is right there in Tuscaloosa. The only thing that I see is when you hear 11-1, you think about, well, what's the loss? Well, later on in the season, the 3-game stretch for Texas, all on the road against Kansas State, TCU, and Iowa State, is what concerns me. I think the loss for Texas comes at some point in one of those 3 games. Could definitely see it from all 3. And Iowa State may come as a bit of a surprise, but the Longhorns have lost 3 of the last 4 in Ames and historically just have not played good out there. You also factor in This is the final time that Texas will travel to all those stadiums as they exit the Big 12. So fans will show up, they will be loud, and that will be a factor. So we'll have to see there. But nonetheless, if Quinn Ewers wants to punch his ticket to JFK International and be there for the Heisman Trophy ceremony as a contender, I think Texas is 11-1 with a win over Alabama. Moving on to our third question now. Which incoming freshman will have the best season, in my opinion? In my opinion, I think it's easy, and it's Anthony Hill for multiple reasons. He's one of the more versatile defenders I think that you'll find in the 2023 class nationwide as a whole. And I think Steve Sarkisian should plan to play him in a lot of different spots this upcoming season because of that. You can line him up on the opposite side of Jalen Ford. You can put him at Buck or Jack along the edge of the defensive line. He can just do it all. And you've seen that on his high school tape at Denton Ryan High School. He even played a little bit of running back and wildcat quarterback, and more often than not would score touchdowns for the Raiders out of those positions in high school. But when you see his game translating to the college level, really is just an all-around versatile defender that can do it all. He hits hard. He finds his way into the backfield if you need to. We saw it a little bit in the spring game where he got after Arch Manning a couple of times and made his first game as a Longhorn a little bit difficult. But Eric Henry and I talked about this in our last video, that it may take some time for Anthony Hill and some of the other true freshmen to get their feet wet when it comes to college football experience. But I think Hill is a guy who, without a doubt, will pick things up quickly and eventually come to a point where, whether you put him at linebacker or along the defensive line in certain situations, he's going to be too good to keep off the field. That's just how good of a football player he is. That's why he was the number one linebacker in the 2023 class. Eventually, it's going to come to a point where Steve Sarkisian knows that he has to play him. Now, how does that change up the rest of the defense? Does that mean that David Benda, who's projected to be the starter now, is more of a rotational guy instead, and they sort of swap places? We'll have to see. But I think that if Benda's position is for the taking, Anthony Hill is a guy who maybe in as short as 3 or 4 weeks could emerge as a guy who takes that spot and runs with it for the rest of the season and maybe the rest of his collegiate career. All right, moving on to question number 4 now. Who are your most surprising players on offense and defense, and why? So first, to define surprising, I'll say surprising is players that will turn the most heads this upcoming season that maybe some fans weren't expecting. So start on the offensive side of the ball. A little bit more difficult for me to think of someone here just because 10 out of 11 starters returning for Texas. So maybe not as much of a surprise coming on the offensive side of the ball. So one guy I think who will turn heads when he does see the field is Savion Red this season. It's been no secret that under Steve Sarkisian in the past 2 years, he loves positionless football. And I think Savion Red is a guy who is going to be at the forefront of that this season. He was originally a wide receiver when he got to Texas. Sarkisian moves him to running back after last season. And now the Longhorns envision a sort of Deebo Samuel-esque role for him as they move forward. And I think that's going to be sprinkled into the playbook quite a bit this year. And that has the potential to lead to some big plays. Savion Red certainly has the skill set and the history as a wide receiver and now a running back, getting both sides of the positions there and the training on both sides from coaches like Chris Jackson and Brendan Marion, and now to Tashard Choice at the running back position. That's a great mix for an all-around good football player. And I think Steve Sarkisian goes deep into his bag of tricks and throws out some plays for Savion Red this upcoming season. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, I think this is Byron Murphy's year. I think he's set up for a phenomenal season. The interior defensive lineman from DeSoto. The past 2 seasons, he's been a key rotation piece along the defensive line. But now that Keandre Coburn and Moro Ojimo are off to the NFL, he steps into a starting role with a great mix of experience and skill set. Last season, Murphy was especially valuable when he was stopping the run. A run defense grade from PFF of 83.9. That's good for top 10 among Power 5 interior defensive linemen. And while he only recorded 1 sack, he was 11th in the nation in pass rush win rate with a 14.8% rate. And now with starting snaps on the horizon, I think you can only see growth from Byron Murphy from here. And I think he's going to take his opportunity and run with it. And now to close it out, our 5th and final question. What kind of impact do you expect Jacquies Smith to have on edge play? Will it be a similar role to Paul Chryst on O-line in terms of helping with technique and or scheme? So, for those unfamiliar first, Texas hired former NFL defensive end Jacquies Smith earlier this week. He played in the NFL for 5 seasons with the Buccaneers, Cardinals, Lions, and Raiders, and was a standout at Dallas area high school South Oak Cliff before playing 4 years at the University of Missouri. So, with Smith on staff, I think the answer is yes, absolutely. He has a similar role to that of Christ with the offensive line. And it's as simple as Pete Kwiatkowski just having another set of eyes on the staff to help him out with developing edge talent. We talked about the importance of the defensive line moving forward, and Texas has set themselves up nicely at the edge position. You have guys like Colton Vasek coming into the 2023 class, Jamon Tapp a class earlier. Think of guys on the roster already, Barron Sorrell, Ethan Burke, Justice Finkley, targets in the 2024 class, guys like Colin Simmons. Bringing on a guy like Smith is going to attract that talent and help you develop that talent. Similarly, I think to what Gary Patterson did last year for the secondary. The secondary took a huge jump with Gary Patterson's help, and the defense overall really took a huge jump with Gary Patterson's help. Now, you have to credit Pete Kwiatkowski as well, but it doesn't hurt to have another opinion in your room when you're going over film and trying to break down how you can develop this talent to get a better product out on the field. And especially with the move going to the SEC, we touched on how important that position is heading forward. You can't go wrong with getting some NFL experience in on your staff. And that's going to do it for our first episode of the Longhorn Mailbag. Thanks so much for coming out and joining us. If you like this type of content, go ahead and let us know in the comments section down below. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Remember, this will be a weekly segment, so head over to horns247.com and check out our boards to make sure that you can get your questions in for next week's episode. Until next time.